Good morning from St. Andrew's Church with Lorrie doing our meditation today on July 30th.
Hi, this is Lorrie Bradford, and this is from the book Bread and Wine. Then Matthew's, Mark, and Luke's unnamed disciple attempts to defend Jesus by using the same means as the arresting authorities. John's gospel, however, goes further by naming the sword-wielding disciple as none other than Peter himself. Shortly thereafter, this Peter, who is willing to kill to protect Jesus, would deny 3 times that he even knows Jesus. Perhaps Peter, like the disciples and the rest of us, resort to violence because he is more interested in protecting himself than protecting Jesus. The disciples are unable to comprehend Jesus' way of nonviolence. Over and over, Jesus instructs them to love their enemies and lay down their lives for one another, thus preparing them for confrontation with the ruling authorities and the inevitable outcome. But the disciples never understand Jesus. They hear his Sermon on the Mount, they celebrate the Passover meal with him, but they keep asking, Lord, shall we strike with a sword? I have to go easy on the disciples, though, because I know how slow I am in my own heart to accept Jesus' way to the cross. Today, priests, bishops, theologians, cardinals, popes, monks, religious, and Christians of every stripe shall ask, Lord, shall we strike with a sword? When wars heat up, revelations form it, and violence threatens, we call out, Lord, shall we strike with a sword? And rarely does anyone wait for an answer. To the patriotic mind, there is only one answer, yes. The swords and guns and bombs come out, and people are stabbed, shot, napalmed, electrocuted, gassed, obliterated, decimated. We strike with a sword, and so much more. We cut off an ear, and so much more. We destroy entire countries, incinerate hundreds of thousands of people in a flash. In fact, we are willing to risk the destruction of the entire planet, if necessary, to defend ourselves. Again and again, we strike back with violence to protect ourselves. We carry on thanks to the ever-present, ever-trusty, ever-faithful sword. At this climactic point in the story of Jesus, as the soldiers put their hands on him, arrest him, and take him away, Jesus turns to his disciples for the final time. He's dragged away by the authorities, tells his community once again to reject violence. Put your sword back in its sheath, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think I cannot call upon my Father, and he will not provide me at this moment with more than 12 legions of angels? But then how would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say that it must come to pass this way? Matthew 26. Jesus invokes God and God's nonviolent armies, the thousands of angels, who would answer if called, but he keeps an eye on the scriptures. He will not become a murderous imperial Messiah. He is a nonviolent, suffering servant of Isaiah. He is a peacemaking, sacrificial God. Put your sword back. These are the last words, a definitive rebuke the disciples hear from Jesus before they run away. If ever there was a moment in God's eyes when violence would be justifiable, this is it. But Jesus is clear. Put your sword back. His followers are not allowed to respond with violence. They are not allowed to kill. They are not allowed to harm others. They are not allowed to threaten others. They are not permitted to deter violent crimes with the use of violence. Why? Because all those who take up the sword shall be perished by the sword. Violence begets violence. Killing begets killing. Nukes beget more nukes. Death begets death. Jesus, the incarnation of God of nonviolence, stands for life. He will not succumb to the way of violence, although he knows he will perish under the cross's violence. He places his hope in the God of life and awaits that third day. Put your sword back. The command stands as an ultimate reproof of violence. From Christ's perspective, the perspective of one who is under arrest and in trouble with the authorities, our violence reveals that we sided with the empire, that we are no different from the oppressive authorities. But Jesus, wanting us to break free from the cycle of violence, outlaws violent retaliation. Earlier, he suppresses Isaiah's vision of beating swords into plowshares by calling his followers to love their enemies. Now, when the authority sees him, his command remains urgent but more modest. Put your sword back. He will not permit violence under any circumstance. Luke's translation make an equally all-encompassing blanket condemnation of violence. Stop. No more of this. Luke 22. Those of us who would follow Jesus are precluded from drawing the sword. We are people who love our enemies, who prefer to undergo violence rather than inflict it upon others, who reject every form of violence, from nuclear weapons to chemical weapons, to Trident submarines to handguns. We oppose the stealth bomber, the B-52s, the F-22s, the MX, the cruise missiles, the latest nuclear technology, Livermore Laboratories, the SAC base, the Marines, the CIA, the FBI, the Army, the Navy, and all perpetrators of violence and their arsenals. We renounce war and violence, self-defense. We tear up the just war theory and embrace gospel nonviolence. We not only put back any swords we have, but we beat them into plowshares. The unarmed Christ disarms us. Christ's community, the church, is a community of nonviolence. Does this mean that Christians cannot be employed by the Pentagon, the police, or the nuclear weapons manufacturers? The question goes to the heart of Jesus' message. If we obey the last words of Jesus, then we will not, like Judas, side with the imperial authorities, and we will not employ their means of violence. We will refuse to carry weapons, even for the noblest reason. We will not work for any institution that inflicts violence. We prepare instead to undergo what Christ undergoes. Jesus issues this final command, and his disciples turn and run away. They run not only from the imperial authorities who threaten the entire discipleship community, they run from the unarmed, nonviolent Christ who will not defend himself against personal harm. They know that an unarmed response to the imperial authorities. Okay, Tom?
I would add that there's a really good book by John Deere, and is the questions Jesus asks, is all of the scriptures where Jesus asks questions, and then he kind of has some commentary on it. And so I highly recommend that book if you can find it. You might like it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Have a
Bye.
great day.
Sandy.
Bye now.